Welcome to the 5th episode of Issues 101. I'm Allison, a current internet issue voter. Throughout this series, we are sharing 3-minute, nonpartisan, accessible explanations of how Congress shapes issues that matter to you. Today we are covering Congress's hand at the United Nations, how congressional funding and oversight shapes U.S. influence at the UN. At the September 2025 United Nations General Assembly in New York, the Department of State served as the outward representative of American interests abroad, responsible for advancing U.S. foreign policy and diplomatic efforts. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was tasked with corresponding with international leaders to promote American ideals, including peace, sovereignty, and liberty. For many, the Department of State is synonymous with diplomacy and negotiation on the global stage. Congress's influence, which comes through funding conditions and political oversight, quietly shapes how the U.S. projects its power and priorities within the UN system. Holding the power of the purse, Congress decides whether to provide or withhold funding for the UN system and its specialized agencies. While presidential administrations may have preferences regarding the amount of money directed towards the organization, the final appropriations are determined by Congress. U.S. funding for the United Nations is authorized under the 1945 United Nations Participation Act. Specialized agencies and programs within the UN, like the Food and Agriculture Organization and the UN Developmental Program, are funded through congressional appropriations under the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. Funding to the UN and its specialized agencies is managed through accounts administered by the Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. Historically, Congress has withheld UN funding for political reasons. In 1985, the Kassenbaum-Solomon Amendment, which aimed to reduce U.S. payments to the UN unless the organization implemented budgetary reforms, was passed as part of the Foreign Relations Authorization Act for fiscal years 1986 and 1987. Following the adoption of the Kassenbaum-Solomon Amendment, the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 40237, requiring either consensus or a two-thirds majority to approve budgets. Previously, budget decisions required only a simple majority, which allowed many smaller contributors to outvote fewer larger contributors. Today, Congress continues to exercise financial influence over the UN by restricting and in some cases prohibiting funding to certain specialized agencies. These restrictions, known as limitation riders, prevent U.S. funds from being used for specific purposes. Thank you for joining us for the 5th episode of Issues 101. Follow Issue Voter to get alerted about future episodes. For further reading, check out our article at blog.issuevoter.org, The Hidden Diplomat, Congress's Quiet Hand at the United Nations. Issue Voter is a nonpartisan nonprofit. Sign up at issuevoter.org to stay up to date with new legislation and send your opinion directly to your members of Congress.